recommend any illustration board other than illustration board that is completely archival. It sounds ridiculous, but most illustration board is not archival, and you'll get more warpage and bendage long run. So if you want something about this thickness, I would get 2 to 4 ply museum board. It's not that much more expensive, but it's solid cotton all the way through. And it looks beautiful. It's the museum board is what you usually see, you know, white mounted photographs where they have a beveled cut and you've got this nice thick cut on the bevel that looks all cottony. That's museum board, right? So specifics in the name is absolutely important. If you don't want to go museum board and you're going specifically to illustration board, I would not go to Michael's for the illustration board or places like that. 90% of that is acidic. You need something that's pH neutral, no acid. Okay. If you're okay with it being a little bit thicker, you can go with what we call book board or Davy board. So it's got a couple of names. It's book board, Davy board, binders board. If you get a 1 ply book board, you're going to have something that's just slightly thicker than this, but not much. This is about a 2-point thickness. If I looked at it caliber-wise, you're going to get just slightly thicker than that. Right? What I have here is actually a very thick book board. I would recommend the book board, but get a smaller, thinner version. This is 2 ply. You can see it's 2 boards glued together, okay, on the side. And it's really apparent here. You see that stripe? See that stripe down the middle? Okay. So it gives you a sense of the thickness you're dealing with. Right down there. All right, Davy board, book board, any one of those binder boards, they're all going to be pH neutral. What you want to do is make sure you don't get chipboard. Guaranteed chipboard will warp majorly. It will warp the most out of everything we've just listed off. Even it will warp more than the illustration board. Okay. Bang for your buck. If you buy huge book board, this is half a sheet of book board. It's like the size of a kite. It could take you off on the playground, right? Fly away with it. Multiple people are going to be able to use it. Your costs will go down significantly. Okay? The thing with the book board is that they often mislabel it. They also misfile it. Often it's underneath the chipboard, so you got to really watch. Chipboard's going to look clotted. It's going to have an oily appearance. It's going to look like parchment paper. Okay. So sometimes you're going to see book board put under chipboard and be like half the cost, just because the person that was working there didn't know what they were doing. Just an FYI. So the last thing you want to do is go in and buy it and make a guess. So if you know what book board looks like, that's where I would start with. Okay? Questions? Okay, the next thing is direction of the grain. When you're dealing with a game, you want to make sure the grain direction, 351, right? You guys remember it from 351? Okay. The grain direction always should go from the top of the game board to the bottom of the game board. What you don't want it to do is fold against what this is, which is the spine. Okay? Grain will curl. So if you take any of your sheets of paper and lick the side of the piece of paper, you're going to see the paper will curl with the grain. So if you've got all the hairs going like this in the pulp, you want that to follow your board line. And the reason is, if it goes this way, it's going to want to curl this way, which breaks your spine. Okay? You want both sheets, both sides, to go this direction. We took this too. You should be up here telling me, okay? So the next thing is when you buy the book board and you're going to get this large sheet, because if you buy the small sheet, they'll overcharge you. You got to figure out what the grain direction is. Usually it goes the length of the board on all of them except for watercolor paper. When watercolor paper is bought because it's mass produced in a fourdrinier, that's usually going in a landscape format and the grain is going through the narrow side, okay? Mostly in bookboard, though, it's going through the length. So you can see my grain direction on this because I drew lines on it. You're going to cover all your boards. So if you share boards, make sure you just draw grain direction on it and cover it. It doesn't matter, okay? So looking around the room, there's a ton of people that have had boards.
They don't, when I asked, only Chris was like, I did it.
Okay. So this sheet was double the height, so it followed the traditional route, but you still want to check just in case. So the easiest way to check, as you learned in 351, is to lick your sheet of paper, right? And you can find the grain direction. So literally in your tabs, you know, lick it and you can prove it, okay? The other thing is to rip it, so it'll rip nice and straight, just like when you were a kid and you ripped out something on the newspaper, one direction went really well and the other direction went all crazy. The crazy direction is against the grain, the nice straight direction is with the grain. But on a big board, obviously it's difficult to rip. So sometimes you can physically see it, which I think you can kind of see it on this one. Other times what you want to do is you want to get equal distance from the edge. Take your hand, place it equally distanced from the edge of the board, and try to bend and feel the resistance. So this is kind of difficult, but this is even more difficult, okay? Because the grain is going this way, it doesn't want to bend easily that way. But because the grain is going this way, it wants to curl a little bit more. Don't take the whole sheet and go like, oh wow, it bends really easily. Because you can see that it's more difficult to bend this way. But if you have this giant sheet, anything can bend, right? Because it's the scale, right? So make sure that you've got head to foot grain going this way, okay? Questions? Okay. All right, so next thing, covering wise. Most of you are going to be covering with things that are being printed out. So I brought in Katie Blaine's mini portfolio. She did not take book arts, and you can tell immediately because of this. So after doing all this, I was like, okay, wait, man, if she'd taken book arts, look at that. Look at all that modulation in here. That's because she didn't know anything about grain. Okay? So every single thing you do, now you're going to want the grain to go head to foot. Every printout, you're checking your absent paper. I don't care if you're licking the corners of your absent paper. Your parents are looking at you like, what the hell are you doing, roommate? You've got to make sure that that's happening. Because this is really well done. She got a lot of great feedback from it. The whole thing is going to fall apart. This was last spring. Okay? By comparison, this is probably 10 years old now. It's been shipped all over the place. Never going to fall apart. Okay? So grain is the essential part, right? When you print out, most people want to have their printing happening the same direction their grain is going. So if you're going to print off campus, ask them if they have it on a roll and how they're going to print it, and ask them to check that grain direction for you. Got it? Okay. And then if you're gonna end up using Hansen paper or anything like that on the back side, same thing. Last year, Ivy did a gorgeous, does anybody remember Ivy's? Absolutely essential, just gorgeous done. She, pardon? She did this in book arts class as well. And one of the things that she commented to me was that knowing how book cloth worked, she felt that she had an advantage on this, okay? So I would recommend that you actually make the purchase of book cloth to do the back side of this and not be worried about trying to fight your materials, okay? If you do book cloth, you want to get the thin book cloth. And don't buy it in the little plastic rolls, all right? It's worth the drive. The cheapest place to get good book cloth, though, is a drive. It's Hiromi's. It's the place everybody in the United States orders from. So you're really lucky that it's local. It's spelled the Japanese way here. So H-I-R-O. M-I.
Where's that at?
It's in Bergamot Station.
Oh.
So go down to Santa Monica, get some good food, see some good artwork, and buy some book cloth. That was the advice that she gave, you know, and basically was kind of like, felt like she kicked everyone else's ass, to be honest with you.
And you know what she really did in this class specifically, her board game was aesthetically pleasing, but also really well done craft-wise.
Mhm.
And it just was amazingly good.
And the thing is she used everything from like 155 all the way through. I mean, you could see where Ray had taught the laser cut on the work and then all the way across. And so by the time I had her in portfolio, she was like, this is just so easy to put together. Now it's just photographing it. Whereas if you do this cheap up front, I've had in portfolio class students going, oh my God, it's already falling apart. How do I handle that in a photograph? And then they're spending hours and hours and hours photoshopping when they could have just documented it and moved on. Okay, so it's really like, don't shoot yourself in the foot. Okay. All right, if you don't do book cloth, then, do you know where this material is coming from?
That's actually kind of it's a cheap paper, but it usually is on a roll.
Okay,
It's just pebble paper.
okay.
And every game I've ever dissected uses the same
Yes.
stuff.
Yeah, so where can they buy that? They very
The places that we bought that before were places like Dick Blick actually has it, but it's always with like specialty papers. You just have to ask for the really thin stuff.
Okay, so it's the same thing with the book cloth then, right? The only thing I would say on this is that you see it starting to curl this, can you see that? It's starting to curl out this way. So that tells me that one of those pieces is going in the opposite direction. Okay? The other thing is thin pulls thick, always. So the thinnest material will pull all materials the opposite direction. This is thinner than that. If this was thinner, it would be curling inward. It's contrary to what you think, but it is always thin pulls thick. And it's, you've got to think like a drum. So once there's moisture in it, the thin is going to absorb the moisture first and pull, right? And it's also going to let go of the moisture first. Okay? So if you're trying to make it so it's perfectly flat, what you'll notice in the mass-produced ones is they have the same weight of materials on each side. Okay? All right. So I don't care what you use. I'm just giving you what Ivy said, and then you decide what look you want in relationship to the concept that you're doing, as Ray's saying. But you got to know thin pulls thick. Just make it consistent. Okay? All right. Questions on that? All right. Next thing is Again, I don't have my tools, so what I thought I would do real quick, because I have it set up for the class already, is just, I pulled out my examples previous for constructing boxes. So the space between any two materials is always the size of the two materials connected together. So depending on the board that you buy, the thickness of this gutter is the thickness of the board.
One. So if it's one ply, it's one ply gutter. If it's two ply, it's two ply.
Yeah, let me see if I can find people that are in the class are gonna be like, it's right there. You remember better than me. I'll prove the point. Okay? The reason is because you're folding up two, all right? So if you decide that you want to have it up and then over, then what you want to do is use a jig, okay? So for example, a lot of things that I see you guys do in this is much like Katie's doing, right? She wants this to fold up to the side and then over this way. But this one, she wanted to go all the way around. So now it's like, well, what the hell do I do to this side? She's got everything figured out here. But what do I do here, right? So think conceptually. This is one. So I go up and over. What do I need to do if I want this to go flat? I use a jig. I tape two of these together, right? So then I glue it down with two of these together, then it's gonna go up, over, and around, right? Because look, it's already making the bend. There's one, there's two. Even though there's a wall here, right? So if I put two next to each other, then it should fold completely flat. Okay, it's geometry. It's the things you knew naturally until they put it into a geometry class. All right, and then made you prove it, and then it was like, what the hell? Okay.
So therefore, if you're doing something like that, it's one ply with two ply as a gutter.
Right. So, and you can see it literally in here, right? So if I were to go to here, right, I've got it, it's gone to the side. I still have a whole nother piece of space right here. It's physically there that allows it to go flat. Okay? Questions on that? Okay. My recommendation is don't measure a damn thing. Okay? When you go into Dean's class, if you were to take the book arts, she would tell you to measure everything, but this is because you're getting the formal aspect of what you've already defined. So first, my suggestion is that you make a demo one, make sure it works, don't measure anything, figure out conceptually how it goes. And then once you have that, then measure the hell out of everything, okay? Because you can measure twice, cut once, as they always say, but you can measure the wrong thing 4, 5, 6, 7 times. It's still the wrong measurement. Whereas if you just, do it first, then check it out, then you're in good shape, okay? All right, so then the next thing is covering. I think I have something that's half covered. I thought I had something that's half covered. Maybe I don't. I'm doing this. Yeah. Okay. Covering was, okay, think major bleeds for this. Okay, so if you're designing the outside, which, professionally produced ones I don't see as much, but why can't you guys break that norm, right? So at any rate, What I would recommend is consider bleeds and give yourself a healthy bleed. This one's going about an inch over. Does this one, do you appreciate this
Yeah,
one?
you can take that apart. That's the whole point of this. That's
Okay.
why I buy the crappiest games ever for this.
Yeah. Okay, so at any rate, my recommendation would be craft-wise to buy a see-through ruler. You ever seen them? They're clear and they have red lines all over them. Okay? Buy the one that has the centering zero. So the ruler's like this, in the middle is the zero, and then it counts 1, 2, 3 out. It's going to make your life a lot easier on cutting and creating the corners that you want. And this isn't exactly a good demonstration one because of the way the corners are cut. So let me just kind of take a moment and think about how I want to talk to you guys about that. Okay, so if you're having just a plain cover, it doesn't matter as long as you have the grain direction the right direction, okay? All you have to do is slam down the front cover, slather glue on it. That reminds me, glue. PVA.
What kind of glue is that?
PVA, polyvinyl. Does anyone remember? Acrylic?
I think it's
Something.
adhesive.
Adhesive, yeah. You can buy it in big jugs. Don't buy Martha Stewart brand, it's a price, it's ridiculous. Okay? But I'm saying that because you can buy it now at Michael's, really cheaply. What you want is pH neutral. You hear the theme, everything's pH neutral. Okay? It looks like Elmer's glue, but it's reversible, and it also doesn't create a staining effect. But you know how when you took Elmer's glue and you put it all over your hands when you were a kid and peeled it off, and it kind of had that, PVA does the same thing, but when you put it on your hand, it doesn't crack. It doesn't have the same crackiness, it's much more stretchable. It's also a great thing, like you can make your own fusible facing with it, so you can paint PVA onto wax paper, let it dry, peel it off, put it on here, and then apply an iron to it, and it will immediately heat up, melt, and then you've got basically a positionable mounting adhesive. Okay. Anyway, so slam a bunch of PVA, slather it onto your board. Again, you're still making sure the board's going the right direction, grain-wise. Then position it on cover-wise. Okay. Then what I would do is I would recommend you pull out your handy jig that I put away. Okay, which is going to be what? How many boards thickness?
2.
2, okay. So I put my 2 board thickness here. Your head and foot is the most important thing, so get your T-square at this point. Put your T-square here, right? You line it up with this, it's glued down. Doesn't matter as long as you get a plain backing, okay? Then what you do is you take your backboard and put it on top of the T-square 2-ply jig away. Because your foot is ideally the one that's supposed to be level, okay? Right? Because that's where it's going to stand if it were ideally on a bookshelf, but mostly because it's going to be easier for you to retrofit the top, okay? Got it? Okay. So we've got both of those glued down. Make sure you get a rolling mounter, okay? A lot of the problems I've seen when I get into the portfolio class with bubbles on this and stuff like that is because people are using like a spoon, their hand, whatever, right, to position this down. If you get a rolling one, I don't care if it's like a paint roller. It'll go nice and flat and you'll feel a lot better about it. Okay? All right. If you have a bone folder, that will work as well, but don't push really hard. Remember, that will stretch it, right? So you're ready going. Okay? All right, so now you've got it glued. The next thing to remember is, how do I want to cut so that I have a nice shape all the way around the outside? My recommendation is that you consider the fold, the edge of the board. So you gotta consider that I'm gonna put a little bit of glue on the edge of this and glue the board to the side. So I'll take my bone folder and put it here. And then I'm gonna have it go around the corner. This is where that see-through ruler is gonna work really well, okay? Just pull out your see-through ruler and put a 1/2 inch, whatever it is that you decide, over the top of this. So pretend this is my see-through roller and there's a line right here, okay? I've lined it up over the top of that, so I've got a 1/2 inch beyond, and then I can cut off the excess. Follow me? Okay. Once I've done that, what I'll have is an even amount of space on all sides. Okay, so it will look neat, and you won't get these funky differences in bubbles in here. Okay? The next thing that Ray wanted me to talk to you about is the corners. Okay? The ideal scenario is to have the corner have a 45-degree angle.
The reason I asked Sarah to do this is because every time I've done it wrong.
So you want to have a 45-degree angle where the cloth is, or whatever covering, and then have this point to those corners. Okay? These are doing it slightly different. These are more like hospital corners, but I think for your portfolio it's probably easier, to be honest with you, to do the 45-degree angle than these hospital corners, and it will also look nicer. Okay? So what you want to do is take your see-through ruler and you're going to put it on the corner. Okay? And what's so nice about your see-through ruler, especially if it's a zeroing ruler, it's going to have this grid structure on it. Okay? Like this. You guys know what I'm talking about there, right? So you're going to be able to look at it and go, oh, there's about 6 squares here, there's about 6 squares here. Perfect. You're kind of evening it. So you're going to get a perfect 45-degree angle cut by the visual space here, rather than trying to measure 45-degree angle. Follow?
That's right.
And way easier than using a triangle, which is the way I was taught. Okay? And that was the way you
That's
were
the way I was
taught.
taught. Like sitting there going, that makes sense.
This was just something I jerry-rigged after years of okay. So it's going to look something like that, and if you buy one, some of them have like a metal cutting edge right on here, which is really nice. Okay. So then you run your X-Acto knife along that. The only caveat is, when you line that up, so if this is my ruler and I'm lining it up, make sure you go a thickness of the board away from the edge and a little softer. This is the biggest mistake that people will make, because it's got to come up and cover the corner.
Say that again.
A thickness of the board and a hair more. Because it's got to cover the corner. As soon as you slice right into the edge, then you pull it up. Pardon my French, then you go, oh shit. You've got this big open swath. And then you're trying to like jerry-rig it and cover something over, and Ray goes, well, that's really obvious. Your crap's a problem, right? Okay. So, everybody with me? You got it all drawn out? Sorry. Can we move on? Okay. So you've got it all glued down, everything's equal all the way around, and now you've got your corners cut. Gluing this down. My recommendation is you glue the sides first. So slather glue in here, slather glue in there. glue it down,